This video contains discussion of harm of children and self-harm and the experience of those who have lived through it. Please proceed with care. Hello everyone, my name is Alicia Jackson, licensed professional counselor, and welcome to my channel. Today we are reviewing Couples Therapy, episode 403, which is the 4th season, 3rd episode. Here at this channel we do a different type of therapeutic review. We do a different type of review where we get a little curious. Get a little curious and wondering what's happening internally for these couples as they're showing up in this therapy room. Why are they showing up in this way? What's happening? Get a little curious about that. And utilizing a model internal family systems as a method and as a lens in which to see these individuals and even the therapist and even ourselves. And why do we get curious? We get a little curious to learn a little bit about relationships and even potentially a little bit about ourselves. If you are returning, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now let's get started. So first we have our throuple. We have Josh, Aaron, and Lorena. And so Orna, the therapist, what she's doing is she's separated the throuple and she's seeing Josh and Aaron and Josh and Lorena separately, which is interesting. I think it's an interesting dynamic, and I see what she's doing. We need to like pull apart what's happening because there's multiple dynamics happening, especially since Lorena and Aaron are not in a relationship with each other. These are two different partnerships. They're just connected to one person, one centered person. And so there needs to be some flushing and some fleshing out. And it would be different. Like I said, it'd be different if Lorena and Aaron worked in connection with each other, but they're not. So we are getting and we're learning a little bit more. And so Orna talks about, the therapist, she talks about repeating patterns. She's like, you notice, and we do notice at times that in relationships there's a pattern that's being repeated. And of course, this is kind of visible with Josh because he's got two different partnerships happening at the same time. And there's two different scenes where Aaron and Lorena are both talking about where they feel like Josh isn't getting enough and he's not feeling like they're making him or like prioritizing his needs. And Josh is stating that he is trying to be the most epic partner for both of them, but he is not getting that back. And so it was interesting. It's interesting to see that dynamic happening. And of course we're going to repeat patterns in our relationships because we have the same story happening internally. Our experiences, parts of us at different ages pick up beliefs about ourselves and about different strategies and how to get our needs met. And so they're going to try to do that in every relationship. And I'm hearing that there's a strategy potentially for Josh that if you are the most epic partner, your spouse is going to, or your partner is going to meet you there and you're going to feel valued. You're going to feel important because you're going over and beyond to meet their needs. So then they're going to meet you the same way. That is what I'm hearing, like a strategy for him to feel valued and important is to be an epic partner. And when that doesn't happen, there's meaning that's being made about that. And so we see that with Josh, and I believe it's with Lorena specifically, but they go back and forth between the two, that Josh is saying she just doesn't value me as much as I value her. I'm not as important. And I wonder how Josh is determining that. Who's making meaning? How are we measuring the level of importance? What do you need to see and experience in order to feel important? I have so many wonderings about that. And Erin stated that she feels like she didn't orient herself around Josh in a way that made him feel important. Josh stated that he felt second to her career, to her acrobatics, or other hobbies in her life, and now she's trying to prioritize. Now she has a part of her that's hearing the need. And the therapist said, I hear you. And I'm sensing like there's there's some delight, maybe. It was like a smile she noticed on his face. And he's like, well, not that I delight in it. He said, I could make it more delicate about how the impact of me not wanting to be this epic partner anymore is having on her. I could make it more delicate, but I don't intentionally. And I feel like that was a brave thing to name. He's like, yeah, this is what I don't do that intentionally. And so then Orna reflects to him. She's like, so then Aaron hurts the same way you do. And then Aaron's like, yeah, that's how I feel. Yeah. Yeah. And then Josh is like, hey, now wait a second. Like, so Josh is like, yes. And can we add more context to this? It's interesting because Aaron chuckles a little bit about this. So you see that there's some discomfort. There's some, even probably some guilt or shame around what she's about to disclose. And she shares what happened, that they had this person that they agreed she would not connect with, and she did. And she's like, against, my morals and my judgment, I did do this. And Josh is like, so what is that called? And she's like, well, I went against the boundary. And he's like, and what do you call that? And so then the therapist is like, what's going on? What's going on? And it's like there's a part of Josh is like, you need to name what the pain was. You need to say it. Say what you did. And I'm wondering even there, like what is Josh hoping for? By having her name it, what is he hoping for? It's so interesting because then after he names it, because the therapist gets curious, like what's happening here in this questioning, and he said she cheated. That's what it was. She cheated. And Aaron said, yeah, I messed up. And I'm trying to adjust some things. I want Josh to know how important he is to me. And then there's a switch that happens in Josh. I don't know if you noticed it, where he's like, I just want to praise Erin. I really want to praise her for taking the bravery to name this, to be open about this, and in this space. And I'm holding space for her, and I forgive her, and I praise her for her bravery. He's like kissing her hand and reassuring her that she's good. This is about what's happening internally with Josh. Okay. So there's a part of him that wants her to pay for it. There's a part of him that doesn't want her to feel any pain about this or any shame about this. That's protecting her. And I wonder what the fear is. Like, what is the fear around her sitting in the reality of the betrayal? What is the fear that Josh has about allowing the part of him that has some feelings, some big feelings about what Aaron did? What is it, a concern if Josh like allowed himself like to hear the part of him that's upset with her, the part of him that's angry, the part of him that feels like wants her to name it, like say what you did, right? What's happening there? Because there's like a say what you did. Oh, Aaron, she's so brave, right? So both of these parts are here, and they're navigating this relationship, and it's so interesting to see that internally for Josh. I wonder what that's connected to with Josh, and what he's battling around this betrayal, this boundary crossing that happened between him and Aaron. And so Orna talks with her consultant. And this conversation is a bit interesting to me. And I wonder, like, I wish I could have been there. But I wonder, definitely a part of me does. She's saying that he's nurturing her. He's attempting to nurture this neglected self, his inner child, these parts of him that have felt unimportant, devalued, ignored, by adding these lovers and repeating this same narrative of you don't love me, you're forgetting me, I'm not important to you. And I hear them. I don't know if this is about the polyamory thing. I don't know if this is necessarily. It could be, But I don't know if that's the case. I feel like what could be potentially happening is that Josh is seeing an opportunity to prove his value, his worth by being the epic partner for multiple people, because then what will that say about him? And if he is the epic partner for those people, then what box will that be checking internally for him? And what potential is that for his needs to get met as well by being an epic partner for many? And I could be right saying the same thing or the same, but just a different way. But that's like what I'm wondering for Josh. And so Orna wants to ask Josh to contain this power of this need he has by not like pushing it and making it the burden for his lovers, the people he's connected with, and to see how they're actually meeting his needs, to see how they actually are attempting to meet him where he is. That's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge. It's a challenge for all of us. I think we all have that challenge in our relationships by not putting our past unmet needs on our partners and allowing them to, or making them be the, like, hold the burdens of those past needs being unmet. If they're not attended to, if those needs and those past neglected parts of us or hurt parts of us haven't been attended to, then it will be hard for Josh to hold it. He won't have the capacity to hold it. He will constantly be like, here, take care of my wounded child. You take care of my wounded child. You take care of my wounded child. That will be what happens if he's not able to really truly attend and meet the needs of those wounded little ones inside. And so next we see Josh and Lorena in the session together, and they're discussing situations where they had like a rupture, a conflict, a rupture, a hurt around planning for the future. And we know historically that Lorena has parts of her that are very, very unsettled about planning for the future because of her really tumultuous situation with the life of her mother and all of that, and the death and the sickness, and how that just like it was prolonged, that she didn't know at any given moment. So planning for the future is challenging for her, and that's something like that's the area for her to get curious about and extend some tender love toward. And I'm seeing to where in this relationship it's like it's being like called to task. And so Lorena is like, okay, I planned something for the future. I planned something by the end of the month. And Josh is like, great, awesome. I'm important. I wonder, like, is that what that's saying to Josh? If she plans something for the future, that part of her is like, I'm important to her. And so Josh is like, great. So then the end of the month comes, they're together. But then he's like, wait a second, weren't we supposed to go to that thing? And it didn't happen. And so then Josh is left with this question of like, what's happening? Was that deceptive? Like, what? I don't understand. And so then Lorena explains that she did have this plan, and she had a coupon and it expired, and then her budget, and she couldn't afford the regular price, and so then she just sat with it and didn't say anything out of embarrassment, and you could see her hand like went over her head, and she's just like and so Josh responds by saying like, I don't care about the event, I just want to plan things with you. And he starts to like, what I crave. And so he started to name his need, and the therapist said, okay, you're talking about what you're craving, would it be more helpful to hear from Lorena more? I really do. I like what Orna is saying is a beautiful how do I say it, like intervention. It's just like the end result. It seems like she's trying to skip a couple steps in. With her, I don't think she is IFS trained. It definitely feels like she's trauma trained. She's like very competent. I want to be clear, like very competent in how she meets these couples. I want to be very clear. And there's some steps that are missing. It's hard to ask, right? Because we don't know where this wounding happened. Okay, so say for an example for Josh, say this wounding happened, he was 7 years old. We're asking a 7 year old to hold a need and be attentive to Lorena while she's explaining something that is very nuanced and complex. Okay, and so if Josh was able to attend to his 7 year old, have his 7 year old like really get its needs met, what would it be like? What would it be like then? Because then that 7 year old would be like, I'm cool. Yeah, Josh, go ahead. Listen to what she has to say. I understand. Like, I've been through that, but you've heard me. Okay. I can make space for you to hear her. It's like we do a connection with ourselves and our inner child first, so then that we can make space for other people to be heard and felt by us. What happens is when our inner child have not felt heard and attended to by us, then they will demand. They will demand the attention by others as, hey, what they've been and experienced, it needs to be attended. I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all. Absolutely. And they're not understanding in the moment what's happening, like big picture wise, either. And so Lorena, she tries, right? Lorena tries. She said, yeah, I felt charged. I felt really charged. And so there was like this anxiety, this big pressure because she's holding her limitation. Like, I am deathly afraid of planning things in the future. And that has messed up this relationship. And I really care about him. And he's a nice human. And okay, so I want to fix it. I want to try to plan ahead. And so the therapist asks, like, so Josh is like interjecting, and the therapist asks, hey, is it okay if you hold your feelings and listen to allow for new information to come in? And Josh said, that's fair. It's really fair, your request for me to hold what I'm, my feelings. And at the same time, there are very important moments. Yes, I feel like what's happening is like, hear me. No, hear me. Hear me. No, hear me. And so if we make space for Josh to hear himself, for there to be acknowledgement for Josh and his, I've of course made up this number, like 7 year old self, to sit with it and feel heard, feel acknowledged, feel seen, then there's more space. And then I also wonder, what is the fear that he has about not listening that isn't being addressed? So more about, because what's happening, I feel for Orna is like she's telling his 7 year old self, sit down in that chair and listen. Hold both of your ears and listen. That's not right. I don't even think she's doing that. Like, because she said, oh, he's not liking that I'm doing that. And when she was meeting with her consultant, and I wonder how she feels about the fact that she's doing that. And how she feels towards Josh, this part of him that's demanding his needs. Like, ooh, I wonder if we can make space for Josh. What is the fear? What is the fear that you have about not listening to Lorena? If we listen to Lorena, will your needs become decreased? Will your, because we know these two big energies in Josh. We know this, like, what did you do? Tell me what you cheated. That's exactly what you did. And then we got this other energy that's like, oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for saying that. You're so brave. So we have these really two big energies, and there's not a lot of balance in between them. And so there's this one that's like, no, this is very important. This is what happened. And then we got this one that's so gracious and gives grace. And I wonder if he is fearful that the one that's so gracious and gives grace takes over, then his feelings about what really happened won't be met, won't be heard, won't be acknowledged. That's what I sense is happening. And he said he's tried to do that. He said, but it just hasn't worked yet. It hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. And so the therapist said, yeah, it's like a never ending hold your horses. That's how you listen. And then they took a pause. Yes, I agree. I agree with Orna. Where she's going is so right. And there's some steps in between that Josh needs some space. He needs some space to explore the fear and the concern around listening and not fighting for his needs to get met. If I don't know how old this little one is, because there's probably multiple, I'm sure, but I don't know how old his little ones are. But I'm sure they've been waiting for a long time. And they need help. So they are only trying to fight to get their needs met in the way that they know how. And I understand how from Orna's view, is she's seeing the impact this is having on his relationships. And so she's like, hey, hold your feelings. I'm not saying your feelings are wrong, but just hold them and listen. And I'm wondering too if there's another way. I Usually I've seen her make a little bit more space for the backstory of what's happening um, internally in a person, and I don't know if she hasn't done that because they're a throuple and there's like not enough time, and so maybe that's what the need for the separating the two partnerships is, to make more space. And I'm hoping maybe we'll get to learn a little bit more about this one that's fighting, that's advocating for Josh's needs to be heard and acknowledged, because they are hijacking conversations, they're hijacking the therapy sessions, and they are preventing their partners from being heard. But there's a reason why they're showing up. And so it should be interesting to see how this plays out for sure. So next we have Rex and Joey. And a reminder, they've been married for 10 months. And the reason why they're coming to see Orna is because this dynamic around mom. As mom was living with them at the beginning of their marriage, she is a Christian and has a desire for Joey to marry a Christian. That's a non-negotiable, and Joey is an atheist. And so where we left off was Joey decided to cut communication with her mother and is in this like torn space, and Joey is like trying to navigate life without her mother, and Rex has no feelings about this. And so that's kind of where we are sitting here as Orna starts the session saying, hey, tell me what we're going to work on today. Where are we focusing? And Rex said, I'm drawing a blank. I don't have any issues. I don't have anything I want to work on. I'm not angry. I don't feel anything. And so Orna reflects to him, like, yeah, I noticed you say that I don't feel this, I don't feel this, and that the strongest response, the strongest thing you do feeling is not feeling. And it's like, yeah, it doesn't come easy to me to feel. And talked about the blankness, right? The blankness. And Joey came in to kind of even give more context to about the stereotype in the Asian culture for men to repress feelings, and she does not want to repeat what happened in her mother's marriage and her marriage as what she saw. And she even goes in further detail to talk about that later on in the session. But Orna asked for more information, and Joey stated that just culturally there's this like strict father figure, and there's nothing, right, that he doesn't give any like words of affirmation. He doesn't tell you that he loves you. And then Rex said ever. And that is when we saw the first, or at least for me, I saw the first emotion, like affect on Rex. When he said ever, there was like the look on his face. You could see the pain. You could see the pain of the little boy inside that feels unloved. And you could just see it. And so Orna saw it as well and said, yeah, tell me what's here. Tell me what feelings are here. And you could see like the sadness come down. He like put his head down and he said, yeah, it just kind of comes and then it goes. It like disappears. And he felt, it's almost like he felt dejected in that moment as he was in that, yeah, they never tell you. They never ever tell you that they love you. And so Orna said, yeah, can you try to catch it? Like, can you feel into it? And when there's cultural norms, which every culture has, right? In the Asian culture, there's cultural norms about feelings. There's definitely, even for my culture, cultural norms about feelings. And what Joey named was that men are not to feel. And so I wonder, like, what I'm wondering is, like, what Rex fears will happen if he allows himself to feel. What does he fear will happen? Will he be rejected by his father? Like, what will happen? What will happen to him? Orna keeps kind of exploring this a little bit more with him about what is he feeling connected to his dad. And what comes up is like this. There's like a resolved kind of anger, not a loud anger, but like this calm anger. Like, yeah, I hated him. And he said that even when he tries to say the words I love you, like, they don't form. Like, those words, like, a part of him will not allow him to say those words about his father. And that he wished that he would leave because he would get yelled at every day. And his mother would explain the behavior and just saying, it's useless. There's no use. This is just how he is. And so that's what he would tell himself. And so these are ways, right? These are ways that we protect ourselves from situations like this. You got a child who is trying to feel loved by his dad. And instead what's happening is he's getting yelled at every day. So there's pain there. And how mom attends to that pain, which she doesn't. She just says she doesn't have an answer. It's useless. This is just how he is. And so that is how then Rex learns to take care of this pain, which we know doesn't. That's just how he is. It's useless. There's no hope. And so that's what's covering this child that's feeling unloved. And so the therapist was like, yeah, I hear the rationale you give yourself, but what's under the emotion? What's under the feeling? What's there under this protection? And he said, yeah, then he has the other one. He has the other one, like this part of him that empathizes with dad. That's like, yeah, I just justify it and say, well, he doesn't have anybody else to vent to. He's just here by himself. And so there's it's useless, it's hopeless. What can you do? Then there's, well, he is here by himself. He has someone to vent to. I guess it has to come at me. There's one that's like maybe even trying to figure out, like, why is dad like this? Why is dad like this? And so therapist said yes, right? Absolutely. I'm hearing what you're saying. It sounds very accurate. And she's trying to get to the under. But in the mind and the heart of a child, they usually ask, do you love me? And then you see almost like the little boy show up again. The one that said ever, when she said they don't tell you that they love you, and Joy named that. And it's like ever. Then it's like little boy came up and said, yeah, it's like you wait for them to show you maybe like once a month. And you go to the park or whenever they have time. And it was just it's a sweet, tender moment. And it's really, really sad that there's so much protection around this hurt inside of Rex, and because there's so much protection around his hurt, then of course there's going to be protection around how he shows up for Joey, like in all of this, because it almost feels like Joey's in it by herself because he doesn't have any feelings about it and she has all the feelings about it. Then she's left alone with them. He can't connect with her. in it. And so Joey, when the therapist asked, so tell me how you're feeling about all of this, she said, what's the first thing Joey said? I feel more connected to him because it's something that I can relate to. So now she's like, oh, okay, we can be in this together. Yeah, because I had two dads. My biological dad, she said, not a lot of memories of him. She said she spent some time with him at work. And then her dad, after the separation or around the separation, gave her his business card, which is, oh, sounds so cold, so distant. When she was 8 years old, she got a business card from her dad. Like, keep in touch. Let's network. Let's stay connected. Like, that's what I'm like. Oh, I wonder how that landed on her at 8. And she said she reached out eventually, and the phone number was disconnected. So definitely just heartbreaking to hear that. And then she said immediately after the divorce, her stepdad came into the house. And he was verbally aggressive and physically aggressive towards her mother. And she did not like her life as a child. She talked about what the environment was like in the apartment, always feeling the sense of like danger and glass shattering. And there was a part of her, and hear this, right? So there's the one that experienced all of this, and they're talking about the terror and the hurt. Okay. And then we hear the protection. So very similar to Rex, right? Feeling unloved. And then we have one that says, well, what can you do? It's useless. I mean, this is who he is. On the other side, well, he is by himself. He doesn't have anyone to vent to. Then we have Joey. Not liking her life. Feeling terror and afraid. Then we have, well, he was doing his best. I felt like, she said, right? She said, in a twisted way, I felt like he was doing his best. Okay? So there's one that's making some concessions for dad. And then we hear on the other side, but with my mom, I resented her. And had, like, why did you marry him? Why did you choose him? So there's one that blames mom. There's one that gives concessions for dad. And that's how this one's protected and attended to. And probably some other ways, I'm sure, that she is. And I wonder even how it was for Joey to name that, how it was for both of them, Joey and Rex, to name what they're holding in their bodies connected to their experiences and what's here and what it was like to hear each other name that. We moved a little fast. It's edited, so we don't know if there was more information that happened in the session. But Orna said, so yeah, what are your thoughts? So she's going back to Rex, and Rex said, well, and you notice, I think Orna did say, what are your thoughts? So it makes sense that he says, well, her mom probably thinks that I will do the same. And so she's trying to protect her by getting rid of me. Whoa. That's where they pause. With some further exploration, this could be a really good place to, down the line, do some family work. Especially if Rex is naming is really true for Joey's mom. That, oh my goodness, could be a great space. And also seems like what really needs to happen is both of them like really looking at how they protect themselves or how they have been protecting themselves in their marriage and throughout their lives to really get to a space where they can feel connected with themselves and then to connect with each other. Orna goes on to talk about two different ways that the mind deals with uncomfortable information. I'll say there's two main ways. Maybe that's what she's naming. I feel like there's a lot of ways that our brain can deal with uncomfortable information. And one of them is that she named was repression. The other one was dissociation. So repression is when you take the information and your brain takes it and it forgets it. It puts it like in short term memory. It takes it somewhere. And it's like, we don't need this information anymore. And there is a dissociation is when the brain takes it and sets it off to the side. It splits it. It creates a space where it's like, ooh, let's go somewhere in our brain where we don't have to think about this. And people do dissociate every day, especially with our little handheld computers in our lives that we are so connected to, and we scroll or we binge or that's how, or we read or what, like we just create a little space where we don't have to think about uncomfortable information, or we're in the task and we're just thinking about the task. We're not thinking about the feelings. We're just thinking about the task. That's the way we can give ourselves some space away from the uncomfortable information. And yes, most, I won't say all people dissociate. And I'm very hesitant to say all because I don't know all people. Let's be clear. And I know our nervous system in very, very young age, because oftentimes we're dealing with pain, and we're dealing with pain without the resources to be able to attend to it. And oftentimes the people in our environment, because of what they've experienced in their lives, aren't truly able to attend and meet it and co-regulate with us when we're dealing with it, that our brain has to be quick on it. It has to be quick on helping us navigate these uncomfortable situations. And so if it's more comfortable to forget it or set it to the side, then that's what we'll do. That's what we'll do. And so that is what has been happening definitely for Rex, and it feels like for Joey as well. It just hasn't been named. And that brings us to our next couple. Last, we have Casimir and Alexis. And Casimir and Alexis are really handling some really heavy content. And so I want to just name that and ask and invite you to take care of yourself around hearing this heavy content. I put the disclaimer at the beginning of the video, and still just want to name that to allow you a moment to pause the video if you need to sit with yourself to see, do I want to continue? Yes, I may have parts that want to know and want to hear Alicia's perspective, and I also may have parts of like wondering what's going to happen to me if I do hear this information. So just naming that. And we are coming into the middle of a conversation, middle of a session, as Alexis named that he really admires Casimir's great skill of writing, and they had this idea like, ooh, let's write a book. Let's write a book about trauma. This is going to be great. And Casimir is excited. They're grabbing the notebook and writing some things down. And then Casimir wants to include their ADHD diagnosis as like a part of it, because ADHD and trauma can be very, very linked, and also can have like an impact, right? So not seeing as like a causational relationship, but more just like they're linked, they're correlated, and depending on what is Casimir's story could be causational, but not saying that or making that assumption in this case. So Alexis is like, I hear you, but I really just want this to be solely about trauma. And then Casimir wasn't interested anymore. Casimir's like, okay, well, I want this to be about, like, this is important to me. This is my story. Why is this? And it feels like in this book, this conversation about this book, what's happening is it's like, my story is important. No, my story is important. Like, that's what's happening. Hear me, hear me. And So they kind of shut down. Alexis names like he gets upset, and maybe 20, 30 minutes goes by, and Casimir says, "Hey, are you still upset?" And then Alexis said that he then felt like he wanted the whole world to burn to the ground. Okay. And so this anger, and I want to name it because I feel like this anger is connected to all the harm that has come his way that had no place to go. Had no place to go, was not attended to. Nobody sat with Alexis in his anger when going through this harm for years and years and years, and even the denial of the harm. Like, and it needed a place to go. It needed a place to go. And so his brain created a place for this anger to go that would keep Alexis safe in his environment. And so Casimir said, like, Alexis really did not have control of his emotions. Like, there was no filter. And Alexis said, yeah, I dissociated during this conversation. And so Orna's asking, like, where did you go? What did you say? Alexis has no memory. And so this is where I feel like, and I said this in the last two reviews, that you see Alexis, like there's a face that happens when that dissociation is named, where there's like some shame attached to it. I really feel like there's a part of him that has some shame about what happens. The fact that, one, he doesn't have any control over it. Two, what happens while he is dissociated and not feeling in control of himself. Like, there's a lot of shame around that. So I just naming that. And two, there's a huge impact that's happening with Casimir. Like, so naming all of that because they're all important. Everything that's happening in this space between them is so important to name. Both of their stories are, and everything that's connected to it. There's so much pain here, so my heart, like, it definitely goes out to them. So Casimir named and stated that there was a part of the night where he was just scared, and heard Alexis come down the stairs, and so they ran to the bathroom, and Alexis was talking at them and saying, like, you'll never get it, you're selfish, this is why your mom, your relationship with your mom is this way, and your sister thinks this, and I just wanted to be here. Like, wants Alexis to walk away on the bathroom floor, and Alexis, they said, got Casimir's glasses and broke them and left. And Casimir said that they were like asking themselves this question of like, how much more understanding can I be? A bigger question of, okay, where do we draw this line? Where do we draw the line between being a survivor, having a traumatic episode, which is definitely what's happening for Alexis, and is this becoming where this is becoming very harmful and something that's unbearable for me to be in? And it may sound like right now that what's happening is that both of these things are happening at the same time. This is a traumatic episode, and this is really extremely harmful. It's like that I don't know if you remember the first episode when Casimir took their glasses off and like oh, this, and you could just see the hopelessness, and they named that. It's like this right here, it really brings to full clarity of what the hopelessness that Casimir's holding, truly. And so the Orna, the therapist, like asked Alexis, "Hey, do you remember? Do you remember what Casimir's naming?" And Alexis said, "Well, I remember sitting at the table. I remember being like hail or rain outside." And Alexis does not remember the scene in the bathroom. And he calls this one his dissociative self. And he said that towards the end of the physical harm that he experienced as a child with his mother, he would stop. the harm from happening. And it feels like that's when this one emerged. Like that's when this dissociative self, later Alexis named him as anger, came out. And Casimir named, like, in these moments that it's not Alexis now. It's not Alexis now that it's like processed his childhood trauma. That's not who's here. It is little Alexis who needs to speak and needs to be very vocal. And you cannot oppose anything that they're saying. They are going to speak, right? You're going to hear me. Alexis is trying to be heard, right? So very similar. It's almost like, and I don't know this to be true. I'm writing a story, right, in this moment. But it's almost like that book on the idea for the book about trauma was like a part of Alexis even maybe even trying um to figure out how to allow this angry voice to be heard. And what happened when Casimir said, "Can we include my ADHD?" That part was like, no, no. This is I need to be heard. I need to be heard. I need to be heard because no one heard Alexis. Literally, no one heard Alexis. And so Alexis said, yeah, this was the only time he was able to stop. And he also named too, I think this was the second episode, that it was how hard it was for him to break ties with his mom. I think it was a 16 and leave, like how hard it was for that to happen. And so this part is like, yes, and it was so hard that now I need to be here in full throttle, full flesh. Okay. And so the therapist asked Alexis, like, is he able to make contact with this part? Is he able to make agreements? And he's like, not really. He did say that he's able to, or feels like he has successfully tricked this part. And I'm like, I wonder how that went. Like, I want to know more about that. And I also want to know how that part felt about the fact that that it was tricked. Because I understand why Alexis is trying to, it feels like Alexis system is trying to like work around this one. Like, who, how, what can we do to make sure they don't show up? And I understand why. Like, because it's causing a lot of harm. And also, this part of him was Alexis saving grace, his exit ticket to end the pain. And it's like number one bodyguard. Okay. And so think about a bodyguard. I don't know if you ever seen that, because now I'm thinking about the actual movie Bodyguard, which we don't have to go down. But R.I.P. Whitney. Okay. But think about a bodyguard who is a Secret Service agent who is trying to look out for their one person, like their, whether it is a, entertainer or a dignitary, they're trying to protect their one person. You think about those movies when like that person just feels like, oh, I'm in a shell. I need to get out. I just need to. That Secret Service agent bodyguard person is never happy in the movie. They are highly upset and have to oftentimes do extra things to make sure to like get them back where they need to be without them being harmed. That is what I'm imagining happens for Alexis internally when he said like he successfully tricked this part of him. I'm like, oh, um, did you check in with this part about how it felt? And so the therapist asked Alexis, like, has Casimir ever like influenced this part or ever like how what's the interaction been? That's why I hear her saying like between Casimir and this dissociative self using Alexis words. And Alexis named like there were times where Casimir witnessed that there would be some switching. Like a sad one would come, then an angry one would come. A sad one would come, an angry one would come. And so let's think about this for a moment. There's a sad one, a really tender one. Alexis named like, oh, he's a sad one. And you even saw like a little smile came up on his face, if you recall. As y'all know, I pay a lot of attention to affect because it tells a lot of information. So there's a sad one, then there's one that is angry. angry, needs to be heard. Don't oppose anything I have to say. I have to be heard. Then there's one that freezes, says nothing. All these are methods of survival, okay? And then it feels like we have a few other ones, I'm sure, that are like trying to problem solve. How do we navigate between this two without like upsetting this sad one? Like what do we do? What do we do? And Casimir is caught in the crossfires in all of this. Casimir described these different parts of Alexis as stages of grief, which makes sense. I mean, it is connected to grief, like grieving the childhood he didn't have, the safe, connected childhood he didn't have, and there's feelings connected to all of that. And at the same time, what Orna named in reflection, because she talked about how the brain is very, in traumatic experiences, the brain gets very savvy and protective about how to negotiate this information and how to survive this environment. And she named that in relationships, that your partner can sometimes be seen as a dangerous object, as a threat, because oftentimes that the partner will unintentionally hit a sore, hit a sore, tender space inside. And when that happens, the protector must come to save. And that's what's happening in Casimir and Alexis' relationship. And so Alexis stated that for him, yeah, this relationship has been very scary because of that. And he has a part of him, right? We got all these parts around the sad one. There's a part of him that's like, maybe we should just leave because then no one else gets hurt. And he's included in that. Like he's included in that. Yes, I'm sure he's very concerned about Casimir. And also too, he's like, I'm getting hurt too. There's re-wounding that's happening in these clashes. I want our book to be about ADHD. You you don't want to hear me. You don't want to make it about me. It's another time. Like so that's like a ah and and again he's responding from like Casimir named the younger space. Alexis now knows. Like I feel Alexis now is aware that Casimir is not trying to silence his voice about telling his story and wanting him to feel heard. And there's a younger one that doesn't have access to that information. And that's where the splitting is happening. And so Orna, Orna discussed this at the consultation group about despair. The despair and the hopelessness about the fact that Alexis cannot recall, cannot remember what's happening, what's happening in these moments of anger and explosion. And Casimir's holding this burden of how to love a survivor. How I'm going to figure out how to do it. That there was something in there, like when I heard them say that at the end of the episode, like I'm going to figure out how to do it. I wondered what Casimir fear or concern is if they don't figure out how to love a survivor. What does that say? What does that say about them? Are they unlovable? Oftentimes, what's happening is that there's protection in the room because protection is going to get protection. Okay. Vulnerability meets vulnerability. Protection meets protection. Oh, you sword up, I'm going to sword up. That's what happens. And the only thing that happens in those moments is more wounding. And so, wounding is occurring on both ends for both of them. And I'm wondering how Orna's going to navigate this because it's very tender, like very tender. Both of them are like very tender spaces inside of them that are actively like needing care, needing attention from themselves first. What's happening is that both of them are reaching out towards each other, and that activates their protection, which then causes the wounding. I feel like this is a very clear depiction of parts and how parts can show up. Because oftentimes when we are in the energy of our protection, we're not always aware of what's happening, and we can't push the pause button. And we're seeing that really clearly with Alexis. And it feels like Alexis has endured so much pain that now he needs he needs multiple people to carry it. And I'm hoping that Alexis is getting his own support. I'm hoping that Alexis is really in a way that's like very graceful, like attending to himself. And because one, he needs it. Like my heart really goes out to both of them. And Casimir, I hope Casimir is like sitting with these questions um, that they're naming of like, how, where's the line? Where is the line? And the line is so thin and it's very gray. And what is the line for them? Right? What is the line for them? And making a decision about how they plan to navigate this relationship. Because this is hard. This is hard, and it's unfortunately can be a common place where people sit. We have a part of us that knows the story, knows why and how the person is showing up in this way. And then we have the part of us that's getting the impact of how their story is impacting our lives. And now that we know that, now what's going to happen? What needs to change? What do we need to do for ourselves? Both of these parts are here. And they oftentimes are warring with each other, warring with each other. And we hear that same war happening in Alexis. Should I leave? Maybe things would be better if I leave because I don't want anyone to get hurt. Whew. Yeah, so much is here. I would really love to hear your thoughts around this. Any questions you have around this? I'm sure there are many. And if you are still with us, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and as always, be cool, be calm, be centered. Peace.